Today on Bruin Lens, we will have a discussion about ePortfolio at Salt Lake Community College. We will explore the uses for it in the academic world and for communication. Bruin Lens starts now. Welcome to Bruin Lens. I'm Dallin Stuart. Today I'm joined by Emily Thompson, Director of the ePortfolio team. Welcome, Emily. Thanks for joining me today. I would like to talk about the ePortfolio at SLC. I'm hoping we can shed light on any mysteries and clear up any myths that students have about the ePortfolio. First, let's define the ePortfolio. It's a website to house a signature assignment for students. Would you like to add to that definition?
Yeah, I think that's the basic understanding, and a lot of people want something really simple, but ePortfolio is actually very multi-layered. So an ePortfolio is a place where a student can reflect on their experience across their entire time at Salt Lake Community College. They collect all of their assignments and reflections over time to tell that story. It's also a place where students can introduce themselves to professors and they can build that relationship so that professors can really support them as unique learners. And then now we have Copilot built into ePortfolio. It's also a place where students can actually have it assess their work and give them feedback on the work that they're doing. We also use general education assessment, Gen Ed assessment happens in the ePortfolio. And so we pull a sample of student portfolios and we look at how are students performing on a specific general education learning outcome. And that figures out or helps us figure out where we need to improve our teaching and learning and make adjustments so that we can effectively serve our students and make sure that we're teaching what we say we're teaching.
Bonnie Fox did a 4-part series. She interviewed the SLCC Student Association, and they said that the ePortfolio is what they get the most complaints about from students. How do you account for these complaints? Can you explain?
Yeah, so I think part of the issue is technology. We had a platform called Digication that was pretty hard for students to use. And one of the issues also, let me actually go back a little bit, is that we were early adopters of ePortfolio. We were one of the first colleges to really jump into the ePortfolio movement. And so we had an open platform model, and then students could do anything, but we couldn't help on the back end because we didn't have administration ability. So we adopted Digication. That gave us the ability to help on the back end, but we forced everybody to do the exact same thing, and that didn't work well. It was also a pretty technically challenging platform for students where they were having to relearn the platform at the end of every semester to get their ePortfolio work in. And my biggest concern with it was if they made a mistake on the platform, they could lose their work forever. So that, to me, was not an acceptable solution. So we had a lot of complaints about the technical piece and worked with SLCC to adopt a new platform. Now that we've addressed that piece, we're seeing a lot of complaints that are more about the teaching and learning experience tied to ePortfolio. So one of them is that students are getting the assignments at the end of the semester when they're prepping for finals, and all of a sudden they have to learn this new technology, submit their work. It can be a very stressful experience on top of the stress of already practicing and preparing for a test. Another piece is that we have some faculty who have never really bought into ePortfolio and still don't buy into it. And so they step into the classroom and say, hey, you all have to do this thing, and we don't like it, and we don't think it's beneficial, but you still have to do it. And for students, that's a really big motivation killer. I mean, it's really hard to show up and do something when even your professor says it's meaningless.
Yeah.
So actually that, I feel like, is my job to address. I can work with faculty and try to figure out what's going on here. Like, what don't you like about it? What are your concerns about it? How can we meaningfully integrate it? Because I believe most of our faculty really care deeply about our students. Actually, I'll say all of our faculty care about our students and they want them to succeed. And if they knew that that behavior was really hurting the student experience, I think they'd change it and I think they'd want to. And so I'm going to start working with faculty more and trying to address that.
Great. What is the ePortfolio office and the student government going to do to address these complaints?
Yeah, so in 2022, we held our first set of open forums with the Student Association, and that's when we really learned that one of the big complaints was that Digication's not something anybody's ever going to use in their careers, right? They're like, this is not work relevant. Why am I having to learn this thing? And so that's where we decided, let's get SharePoint. It's used by 320 million people around the world. Our students are likely to encounter it in the workforce. So we adopted that. So that was step one. Now we're in the 3-year transition period. And so now what we're trying to do is figure out what are the pain points with the learning experience associated with ePortfolio. ePortfolio. And SLCC is doing their own data analysis, and they'll present that data when they're ready. For my part, I've built a data dashboard. I can tell kind of where faculty are really struggling with it still, and so I'll start trying to work with faculty. I'm using the concept of rumble sessions, which comes from Brené Brown's work on vulnerability, and it's this opportunity where we sit down and we kind of hold the difficulty together. Like, why is this thing not working? And can we really be open and honest about why it's not working and think through, is there any opportunity to make an adjustment here? And do we want to try and experiment and see if you have a better experience by trying this? One of the things that I think is really powerful with ePortfolio as a professor, at the end of the semester, I cry when I read my students' work because I see like the transformations they've had and their powerful learnings. And I think many faculty who are doing it meaningfully get to have that experience. And that brings back the whole heart of why we're in this work and what we love about it. And so I want those faculty who don't buy into it or have questions about it to get to have that too.
I want to add that Bonnie said she could not find outspoken dislikes when she went out to campuses to interview students. Do you find once students are familiar with it, they have a change of mind about the ePortfolio? Is our data safe from being stolen?
Yeah, so there's two questions really there. So I'll start with the first one, which is yes, absolutely. When students have a positive experience and they come to our labs and see like, oh, I can make my own website and I can kind of curate this how I want, we have a template to make it easy, but students are taking the template and they're making it their own very cool things. So I think a lot of students get really excited. We have students doing things that I never even imagined were possible. And so students are already outstripping me in my understanding of what's possible, which of course I would expect, but it's really exciting. We have one student, for example, who put her entire degree plan into an Excel spreadsheet. And then every time she completes a class, she crosses it off and it auto-populates a pie chart that shows like how many classes she still has to take, how many she's completed, and which ones are in progress. We have students who have built apps and embedded those in their SharePoint sites. And we even had a mom come in just a couple weeks ago and she was really stressed out. She'd been out of school for 20 years and she was like, I can't imagine trying to learn this thing when I don't even know how to set up Microsoft. Yeah. And about an hour later, I was going to the bathroom and I saw her sitting at a table outside in the foyer. And I said, how are you doing? And she said, oh, I'm so excited. I'm going to call my daughter. I want to show her my portfolio. I'm so proud of what I've created. And so I think when students start to do it, they see themselves reflected back and they get really excited. But it's just a matter of getting them over that first learning curve.
Okay. So you have weekly meetings with your staff. Where do you cover them and what do you cover?
Yeah, so I actually make my team sit in a circle. I have this rule. I'm like, you can't break the energy. We really need to be together and hold a container so that we can have hard conversations. And I lead the team in a really different way. Because we're the reflective office, we do a lot of reflection. And so we'll often start the meeting with like, what's up for you? What's hard? What's challenging? What stressors are you dealing with? With the recent political change and all these constant updates, right? We have a lot of international students. We have students who are, any of us could be impacted, right? Like, will we lose financial aid? These are questions that people are struggling with right now. And so that's where we start, is like, what's stressing us out and getting in the way of our ability to really do whatever it is we need to do? And let's get that on the table and let's hold that together for a minute. And then we'll shift gears and we'll focus on the content that we need to work on. And I think that's actually helped us to create a lab space that people feel really safe in, because anybody can come and talk about what's going on and we know how to hold that with each other instead of just being like, yeah, that's not relevant, bye. We also talk a lot about the projects students are working on. So we have a kind of unique model. Every student comes from a different program. They have different interests and needs. And so they self-defined, what are we doing to advance the ePortfolio initiative? And so one student leads each project. We have like marketing, tabling, workshops where students go into the classroom and teach about ePortfolio. And we'll talk about what's working, what's not. We'll talk about pain points. Because of the way we do things, we're often finding, like, we tried this thing, it's not quite working, right? We're not communicating enough. So some people are starting to have a lot of anxiety. And so then we get to talk about what will we do to ease that anxiety? Like, how can we take care of each other and make sure this person has time to kind of go slowly if they need to, but this person's in the loop so that they're not going, I don't know what's happening. And so it's a lot of that like human piece that we're trying to work through while also getting them skills that help them with the careers they're eventually going to enter into.
That's great. So how is SLCC's ePortfolio team viewed nationwide and even internationally?
Yeah, so that is an excellent question. I actually have a meeting scheduled on May 1st with the Digital Education Council, which works with universities across the global north and the global south. And they're based in Singapore, and they want to meet with us to talk about our work. ePortfolio at SLCC is leading nationally, especially with the implementation of SharePoint. I mean, what we have here is a groundbreaking tool that we developed in-house in partnership with our Student Senate. And it's performing far beyond what we ever thought possible, especially because Copilot is integrated right into the ePortfolio. So students can actually ask it, like, look at my entire portfolio and tell me, like, what are my greatest strengths? And it can read that and give them feedback. And maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but it at least gives them something to think on, right? And something to ask about. So we just went to the American Associations of Colleges and Universities conference, and I presented with Jessica Berryman, Nancy Barrickman, Emmanuel Santa Martinez from the biology department, Ann Fillmore from the English department, and Stephanie Charles from faculty development. And we did 4 presentations on ePortfolio at SLCC and how we're implementing it in different ways, and people were so excited. Some of the things that came out of it was I was nominated for a leadership role for the Association of Authentic, Experiential, and Evidence-Based Education Network. And then I also was asked to give a keynote at the opening ceremonies for next year fall semester at a community college in Pittsburgh. So I think people see what we're doing and all of the learning over time and really take pride in it. I have to say a lot of that comes from people who came before me. So David Huber is really the visionary behind ePortfolio at SLCC, and he did a lot of the groundwork, and then he had people like Katie Lewis, Christy Bogle, Emily Dibble, and even our interim provost, Jason Pickavance, have done a lot of work to really set the stage and get ePortfolio ready so that it can be in this nationally recognized space.
That's great. So David Hubert, the Associate Provost for Learning Advancement here at SLCC, said people call us from across the country all the time to reference ePortfolio. The response was positive from Vancouver. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so when we implemented the SharePoint portfolio system, I felt like we needed to tell the story. And so I actually got to take some of the students who were at the forefront of that work, and that was Emmanuel Mukaz, Emily Orton, and then Daniel Flores. And we all went to Vancouver, Washington, and presented at the Association of Authentic, Experiential, and Evidence-Based Learning Conference. And I think we blew people's minds. I mean, people, I still get feedback on how cool it was. And it wasn't me, it was what the students had to say that was really powerful for people. Like, we go to these conferences all the time, and it's all these faculty who are really passionate about education, and they're talking about their visions and their ideas, but to have students in the room saying, yeah, but this is what really works for us, or this is what matters, and this is what we value, and this is how we were part of the process, and how we got to sit at the table and help make these decisions, I think it inspired a lot of people. And I think people are still wanting to learn from us how we did that. How did we help elevate student voice so that they could be such a critical part of these decisions?
And with how diverse of a campus SLCC is, do you think the ePortfolio helps with diversity here?
Yeah, so I actually think ePortfolio is one of the most powerful ways that we're supporting students. I mean, storytelling is a really critical piece for high context cultures that really use story to build connection. And we're seeing that a lot in the data on who's visiting the lab, and especially who's returning to the lab over and over again. So I have some data here that I think is really interesting. For example, last semester in fall 2022, we had 19.93% of our population were Hispanic or Latine students. And we're an emerging HSI institution, and we're trying to improve those numbers to get HSI status. In the ePortfolio lab, 32% of our visitors were Hispanic or Latine, so that's very exciting. It's also true across academic experience. So our first generation students, we also have overrepresentation compared to the rest of the SLCC population. So we had 52.6% of first gen students visiting the lab, when the actual SLCC population is only 43.6%. So we're seeing a lot of that engagement across diverse populations. When we look at race demographics, that one's especially stark. So the SLCC population has 74.46% of students are white. And in the ePortfolio labs, we see 47.85% of students who are white, and then the rest, it's across different racial demographics.
Wow. So Emily, where are the labs at, and what are the hours?
So great question. So Taylorsville is our main lab. That's where we have about 76% of our lab visits happen. And that one is at the Taylorsville Redwood campus in AAB 126. The other labs, we have Jordan, South City, Harriman, and then we have a virtual campus as well. Our lab hours at the other offices are a bit more fluid because we're led by students, and those students need to work out their schedules before we then develop the lab schedule. And then if they're participating in clubs, they may have a club event, and so we have to fluctuate the hours again. So we really see hours as fairly fluid, but they post everything in My Success. And so as long as students go to My Success, which they can get to through the ePortfolio card, they can find an appointment and book it. They can even find a person that they really like working with and book with them over and over again.
That's great. So a student wants to get their ePortfolio started and they walk into an ePortfolio lab. What should they bring with them for the best success?
So great question. So every professor teaches ePortfolio differently. They're required for general education courses to have a signature assignment and a reflection. But aside from that, they have a lot of flexibility in how they choose to teach it. And so we can't really help. There's not a one-size-fits-all help that we can provide. And so what we'll do is we'll have a student pull up their Canvas course page often and look at the assignment with the student and talk with them about, okay, so this seems to be what the professor's asking. How are you interpreting these instructions? Here's the rubric. This is how it's going to be judged. So do we have all of these components in there? And so we're not just helping them build the portfolio. We're helping them think about how am I aligning my work with the expectations that my professor has given. So as long as they show up ready to pull up a Canvas page, which they can do on their own device or on a lab device, we're good to go.
Perfect. Thank you, Emily. This has been an informative discussion. A lot of information has been given to clarify. Would you give us the ePortfolio website and their social media handles?
Yeah, so the ePortfolio website is ePortfolio@slcc.edu. I don't actually know the social media handles by heart, but we can get them for you. The students really take charge of that.
All right, great. That's it for this episode of Bruin Lens. To watch this episode and past Bruin Lens episodes, go to globeslick.com or find us on facebook.com/SLCCSMC or find us on YouTube, X, and Instagram at SLCCSMC. I'm Dallin Stuart. Thanks for joining us on Bruin Lens.